Welcome in this evening. College football is absolutely outside its mind right now. Head on a Swivel is going to be with you next. Stay tuned.
Georgia Sports Autographs is built by collectors for collectors. They know what fans want because they've been in your shoes, hunting for that perfect piece, the right signature, in the right spot. At every signing, Georgia Sports Autographs make sure it's done right, using the proper ink, following best practices, and paying attention to every detail so you end up with a product you'll be proud to display. They've already worked with many of Georgia's top athletes, and their network gives them access to just about anything you can imagine. If you don't see it listed, don't assume it can't be done. Chances are they can get it for you. Georgia Sports Autograph tests themselves with every event, always improving, always delivering for the ultimate addition to your collection. Trust the team that treats every autograph like its own. Georgia Sports Autographs, where every signature tells a story.
Welcome in this evening. We're head on a swivel. Chris Hayes, Scott Green with me this evening. And man, we got a lot of things to talk about, Scott. It's been a while since we've talked, my friend. I hope you're doing well this evening. How are we?
I'm doing good. I'm glad the portal's keeping me at least somewhat busy. I mean, it's just eye-opening to see what college football's kind of opened the book on. No way we're getting that toothpaste back in the bottle. So it's been interesting. Really, really cool matchup too. I'm excited. I think I'm actually rooting for Indiana, not because Carson's on Miami, but just because I like the way they're doing things. But we can get into it, Coach.
Yes, sir, Scott. My thing is when I look at the whole premise of what we've been witnessing in the transfer portal, which we're going to be talking a lot more about as we move through the segments tonight. But I find it as it closes up this Friday. I see a lot of uniqueness to it because it feels so. I don't know. I want to kind of say underwhelming in a sense for us as a staff. And, you look at Georgia and their staff and who they're retaining versus who's leaving. We'll talk about that later on. But still, I am very interested to see how these new pieces to the puzzle are going to add to the total package of their roster for next year. Hey, we've got the national championship in Miami's backyard, Hard Rock Stadium down in Miami, Florida. You got the Cinderella story, the 15-0 Indiana Hoosiers, the Kurt Signetti group that's undefeated going in. I mean, this team could be an unprecedented 16-0, Scott, beating Miami in their own backyard. Miami's no pushover as well. They've really come on as of late. I feel like they fit that criteria of the team that got hot at the right time. And, they've just proven to be resilient. They started basically at the bottom and they worked their way to the top as a 10 seed, went to Texas A&M and College Station and, basically played in a windstorm up there or over there actually. And then to take on Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. And then of course their very nice win against Ole Miss as well. I mean, they have done the necessary things to make their way to the national championship. Just your overall take as they prepare to play this next coming Monday down in Miami. What's your thoughts on that game?
I think Miami and Indiana are both showing everything. What's tried and true in football is tried and true. Line of scrimmage play for Miami's been outstanding. Um, Putting in profile how Carson Beck is as a quarterback, not asking him to do too much. And obviously, when the game's on the line, asking him to do a lot and watch him succeed. 7 years in college football is definitely going to do that. And Carson Beck's been a good quarterback. I mean, again, even when he's asked just to do simple things, he does the simple right. And the ability to run the ball being, kind of the lifeblood of what Miami can always plug away at to say, look, if we can't do one thing, we know we can do this. And I think that's really, really important. And Indiana, to me, I'm rooting for them two things. One, the average age of their football player is 23 years old. And that's not to gig them in any way. That's just to prove a point of, look, retention and refinement and development is still just so critical in the game. And for some reason, we've just lost that in the shuffle of this transfer portal NIL and just kind of this freelance, free agency done with private benefactors paying for players under the table and over the table and just like the poaching and everything. It goes to show you, like, with a really, really good coach like Kurt Signetti is, and getting the right quarterback, the right fit, you just see how disciplined physicality still wins out.
Yes. You can look at it too. They're under the radar. I mean, Indiana, if you look at their team, there was really a nobody. I mean, they were just that awkward girl at high school that wore the glasses and had the braces that turns out to be the Princess Queen at the end of the romantic drama that you've seen in the past growing up. They just kind of fit that criteria. That's why I kind of call them the Cinderella story in this, because all of a sudden they come out of nowhere. Kurt Signetti, by far being a good head coach, I think he's done a quality job there. Everybody's beginning to make him have this rise of being, the best, the best college head coach in the nation right now, and he's hot. There's no doubt what he's done last year and what he's done this year. I will definitely give him his cookies for that. But we're not going to necessarily have to put him up on a pedestal yet. I do think that he's still got work to get done, but it's really nice to see that he's taking senior leadership. He's taking the tenure of kids who have good quality players that have 3,000 snaps. I would take, as a coach and a perspective of a coach, I would take good players that have 3,000 snaps worth of experience versus a group of five-star kids that have maybe 100 snaps under their belt. There's just something about that. Indiana does not, they don't have any room for error. When I watch them play, I mean, the consistency of what they do at the line of scrimmage, you don't see false starts, you don't see guys jumping off sides, you don't see all the unnecessary penalties that pull and that are drive killers, like the holding calls and things like that. They just seem to be in the right place at the right time. There's nothing flashy about them, but when you're fundamentally sound and you're doing your job and you're gap sound and you tackle really well and you block really well, obviously it's what establishes a good run game. And it's amazing to me that you got, obviously, your Heisman Trophy winning quarterback on that side as well. But it's amazing to me how they can get these guys open, and they seem to always find a way to get the ball to those guys. There's not any of this, well, oh man, they missed an open shot right there. If he's got two steps on somebody, Fernando is letting the ball go. There's just this, to me, a calm about what they do. And it's almost unsettling if you're watching it from the outside in, because you're just like waiting to think something's going to happen eventually. And that's what we saw against Oregon the last game that they played. I mean, there was just no room for error. They didn't do anything that just really made you go, wow, they're just hurting themselves over and over and over again. If anything, they kept pressing forward, and Oregon was the one that was falling down on their face, it seemed at times. So, it's really Indiana's game to win, but don't be surprised to me. This is where all of a sudden the pass rush from Miami is going to change a little bit, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Fernando does like to sit in the pocket, very similar to a Ty Simpson from an Alabama. He's going to sit back there. He does make quick decisions. He does get the ball out. But I think we're going to see a little bit of a difference in the pass rush, similar to what we saw with Miami against Ohio State, that the Miami that we saw against Ole Miss. I knew we wasn't going to get a lot of havoc to them because he gets the ball out so quick, very similar to Georgia not being able to get havoc to Trinidad Chavlis as well. But when we think about Kurt Signetti, everybody right now is trying to put him up on a pedestal. The pundits of the world that want the clicks, they have a tendency to say Kurt Signetti should not be out of the top 5 right now as the best college coach in America. And, of course, we have bias towards the University of Georgia and what obviously Kirby Smart has done over the last 10 years. Scott, what's your thought, man? Is it a flavor of the month right now that we're dealing with? I remember when Dabo Swinney was winning those national championships with Deshaun and Trevor, man, he was the hot commodity as well. Now, all of a sudden, we've got this guy coming from nothing, out of the weeds, and all of a sudden, bam, 2 back-to-back years of unprecedented play, playing for the national championship. What's your thoughts on that?
If he's not in the top 5, he's got to be really close because it is Indiana. I think that's the thing people have to contextualize, like the Georgias, the Texases, the LSUs, the Alabamas, and then you go more north, the Ohio States of the world, the Oregons of the world have just so much saturated talent and so much NIL precedence to go out there and buy whoever they want. And I think Indiana has sold itself is exactly like you said. Look, we're here generating mistakes and never having any of our own. And I think Mendoza has just been a huge testament to that. I love the way he plays the game. Again, there's an FEI rating that I use all the time. It's basically an efficiency rating with the opponent adjusted. And Georgia was consistently in the top 8. And I thought that was immaculate. Then I would go to Indiana and they were always in the top 2. I think people look at the scoreboard and don't revert to, well, how are they moving the ball? What are they doing offensively? Are they resetting the field? And that's the thing that Indiana's really, really good at. I think to this day, I haven't seen a game where Kurt Signetti had a set of blunders that put them in a really weird position. I think Penn State just played immaculate that game. There was a couple things Indiana, didn't didn't win on, just some one-on-one blocks, but that's just part of it. I definitely think you should get a lot of credit. One, contextualizing that is Indiana, and two, retaining that roster as well as he's done. I mean, again, I'm going to keep hitting on this all night long, but the average age of your players is 23 years old, if not 22. That goes to show you things have not changed as much as what happens on the field. It's outside the field that has changed so drastically, and now we're seeing it impact what's going on in the game. And to credit Kurt, I really think he's just been really, really solid when it matters the most. But I agree. Look, for me to put him in the top 3, top 5, if he wins and has this season, it goes down as a historic season as the first 16-0 team in the 12-team playoff. And the way they've done it, the regular season only had a couple tests. I think it was a fair criticism of Indiana of like, do we really know what they are? Then they get 5 sacks against Ohio State. The impregnable Ohio State that was thought, oh, they're going back to back. They're going to do what Georgia did. And then you see what they did in the playoffs. I mean, they dominated opponent after opponent. And look, on the other side of the bracket, it's been tight margins. Georgia has 6 yards to go, can't get it. Ole Miss wins. Ole Miss has the chance to stop Miami. They failed to stop Miami. And in fact, some people could argue one low PI may get Ole Miss another chance at getting a touchdown. So these margins have been tight, but not for Indiana. So I have to give him a ton of credit. I think he's out-coached coaches, not necessarily during the game. Now, he has. I'm just saying that the margins have been tight. I think where he's out-coached everyone is how solid that Indiana team is. That he's developed them to be just so rock solid. When you watch their game, like you said, there's no real A minuses. It's a lot of A+ effort. If you're making a mistake, they're doing it 100 miles an hour. And I think he should definitely get his flowers because, again, Coach, it's hard after the top 3 coaches to me to name who 4, 5, 6 are unless they get a title.
Yeah, very good. Very well said. And, I sit there and think about the fact from a coach's perspective, he's grown on me over the last 6 weeks. And, it's something to say. I know he has a very talented roster of kids that are tenured, not necessarily the 5-star mentality, but to me, the 5-star mentality is not what makes the kid. The development of that kid and what they have done with them just goes to show what their coaching staff has done. And obviously the culture that Kurt Cignetti has brought in. And I know a lot of people who are SEC biased, who are, the Georgia fans that they are, know obviously where we lie as well with that. But I mean, I'm a fan of football and I'm a fan of good coaching, and I'm a fan of a coach that really wants to bring in that culture that I think I'm seeing in this Indiana team and how they're winning ball games. It's very, it's kind of a comfort zone to see versus all the chaos that we tend to look at when it comes to what we're dealing with right now in this new paradigm of college football with the NIL, with how the portal is working. And, we knew the portal was going to be chaotic this year due to the fact of it only having the one window of time. But I mean, now you're getting, I don't know if you saw the news today, the Federal Trade Commission now is getting involved with FTC is getting involved because they're actually saying, listen, we don't know who these agents are that are commissioned with these guys. As you remember, Sark had actually made the claim that some of these kids have got their own buddies basically acting as their agents and working with them to work off commission to that. So the Federal Trade Commission is getting involved. When the government's getting involved with this, it's finally getting to an uncomfortable zone. And I think that's why you see a lot of college football fans that are beginning to sort of, clutch pearls a little bit about the process of what we're seeing. To me, Kurt Cignetti and this team brings us back a little bit. It's like going back and listening to that 80s song that you used to love to see that just gave you that soothing feeling or got you fired up one way or the other. Motley Crue, Kickstart My Heart, every day of the week and twice on Sunday. I would listen to that as a great song. Love getting fired up watching, listening to that song prior to ball games. And obviously any of the big hair band stuff, I can't take away from that, the comfort zone that brings. But, props to Kurt Cignetti, props to the Indiana Hoosiers. Before you put him on a pedestal, though, and you start, saying that he's the best of the best, you still got to look at what Kirby Smart did over a 2-year period and really over the last 5 years if you really want to do that. Let him have his time. Let him enjoy this win. And honestly, Kurt's going to probably tell you that even in the presser if they asked him after the game, do you feel like you're the best coach in college football? He's not going to answer that out loud as yes. He's going to say, let the process, trust it. Let's get to the next year. Let's see where we're at and see if he can establish that over a longer period of time. And then we can start talking about that. But as of putting it right now, let this guy go out there and try his best to win a national championship with a team that was at the bottom rung of the ladder and has brought them back into some type of presidents now that makes them the king of the Big Ten, and obviously could be national champions this year against Miami. Appreciate all of you in the chat and as well as being with us tonight. My name's Chris Hayes. Scott Green with me. Actually, he's over here. We're Head on a Swivel, and we're with you tonight for our weekly show that we're going to be doing in the off season. Appreciate you being here with us. We had some weird news this week, Scott. It's so odd to me. Part of the chaos of the portal to me, when you're trying to sign the new commits and get everybody kind of on a list, and you're setting up the priorities of that list. You don't think that you have to still recruit your own roster, and that has become a part of a new paradigm of what you've got to do now in college football. Not only are you bringing in the 2026 commits, you've got to maintain the commits that you want to keep. And, there was a little buzz this week about Nate Frazier possibly looking. I mean, there was some Ohio State whispers. I don't know really how far it went. But, just your thoughts, the uneasiness of what we're having to do. And even Chauncey Bowen's kind of got in that conversation as time goes on. I really felt like I was in the rumor mill sitting in the hair salon at a woman's salon listening to all the different tribal comments that were going on with Nate. But, it was very nice to know I have connections with good friends of mine who's actually knows his agent. And I felt early on that this was not going to go anywhere, but still, it just makes you feel uneasy when you got your primary running back looking to possibly go somewhere else just due to the fact that there was, contraindications or just, confusion or whatever it may be with maybe said person on a coaching staff, or just not necessarily meeting eye to eye with money negotiables and things like that. I mean, just your thoughts on Nate's situation and just the whole, portal as a whole right now with the University of Georgia.
I mean, speaking to the FTC thing, guys, it was a matter of when, not if, the government was going to get involved with how much money has been flowing in and out of college football through the NIL and the collectives, that this wasn't going to stay this way for long. Uncle Sam's always going to want his piece of the pie, on top of the idea that anyone can be your agent. So the agent world is not regulated whatsoever. Just the premier players go with premier agents because that's easy, but everything else could be family members. It could be friends. And it just becomes really a nasty business. I mean, I have it on very good authority that there are Zoom meetings in the middle of the season with players who are disgruntled, and 50 or 60 of them in meeting with other agents, other coaches that shouldn't be talking to them. And there's nothing being done about it. And, and these are to the point where some, little old me knows about it. And so I think Nate Frazier likely was communicating with other people in the intent to drive the NIL price range up and to negotiate that. And to me, where it's frustrating is you ask yourself, is this really the best case scenario for this player? And I can count on one hand where players who are at a really good situation that were likely to enter their money or to really spike their draft grade up left, and it worked out for them.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing that's frustrating about it. It's not necessarily, hey, look, I do truly want these young men, their talent, their perseverance, their determination. Again, some of them don't treat themselves as student athletes, but a majority of them that do the right thing, I think they deserve all the money that the market says that they deserve. And I think they should be able to negotiate for certain things. The performance on the field, off the field, weighs into that. But a lot of this is just negotiating and leverage, knowing how easy it is just to step over the fence and go to some other team. Yeah. And I think it's really getting, I don't want to say obnoxious is the word, but it's getting kind of nauseating of, okay, we have to retain 90% of our roster to do in order what we want to do. How much does that cost? How much is willing to be spent? And then the idea that another team can so blatantly poach another player. And again, it's this eye-rolling thing if everyone says, well, Georgia does it too, Georgia does it too. Look, if Georgia's poaching players, it's through non-burnt bridges, or it's being done in kind of an efficiency way. Plus, outside of what Ohio State and, maybe two other programs, I mean, Georgia's a better destination. And even with Ohio State, I'd say right now in today's football, it's about an equal destination. It's just getting to that leverage point where something is going to be fixed, and it may not be the fix that's really going to make it better. And that's my worry, especially because it's been so chaotic. It's been such a Wild West show. The NCAA has completely failed. I think once the amateurism clause went away, I think they literally took their ball, went home and said, look, we're going to let it be chaos for the benefit of us because someone's going to run back to us and ask for regulation. Well, now I just have a good authority that it's going to be done through the U.S. Senate, which is not necessarily a good thing. So with that being said, I mean, I'm happy Nate stayed, but to me, it was always a question of what situation is better and what system do you know better or know as well that you can go right in and be as effective as you would be in your junior year at the University of Georgia. But again, like it is, coach. I mean, he's just trying to leverage. I get it. You know, players got to play the game, but I just think the game should be slowed down to be more sustainable across the landscape of college football, because this simply isn't. In 5 to 10 years, this is going to look drastically different, just like the playoffs will. Hopefully that 20+ day bye week goes away. It has been the bane of my existence the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But with all that being said, things change so rapidly, but guys, understand, because it changes doesn't mean it's better. And that's my worry, is it can go from no regulation whatsoever, where my best buddy can be my agent negotiating $1 million deals or lying to me, telling me, hey, the grass is greener, or it can become so hyper regulated where now the market price and market share just gets plummeted to some arbitrary salary cap that people really aren't listening to, and it just drives everything back underground. So it's a real mess.
Yeah. Ever since 2021, and then of course the NCAA wrapping, cleaning their hands, wringing their hands, and saying good riddance. The House versus NCAA settlement now has basically put this sort of open market out there. I mean, we talk about arbitration, we talk about a salary cap. Basically, you just have open free market. It's chaotic every year. I think what bothers me is just an OG kind of guy is, where's the commitment to your program? Where is that solid desire to want to actually commit not only to the football program, but to the brand that you're actually committing to? And I think as college fans, that's really demoralizing, because you feel that pride and that sort of, what I call pride in the stride of being a part of a program that you love and adore. And you feel that your players should have that equal, that equal adoration for that same said football program. If you do this, you're going to have to put these guys, because they're employees of the school now, basically, you're going to have to put them under contractual agreement. That's going to have to happen. You're going to have to add a salary cap to this, along with the revenue sharing that's going on. And there's going to have to, and I hate to say it, Scott, you're right, there's going to have to be some framework, some guardrails that are going to have to be put up. And sometimes it could end up being more punitive, where if they do decide to transfer a second time, they got to sit out. And finally, there's got to be some punishment behind it, because right now there is no accountability for what these kids are doing. We had the one comment here, TJ Finley, 6 schools in 6 years is ridiculous. I'm also looking at the fact there's a kid that we're bringing in, the kid from Kentucky, the running back. We will be his 4th school in 4 years. I mean, that's something that just says something to me about where's the commitment level of these kids that are coming in. And that's kind of what I mentioned in the pre-show concept of, being underwhelming, because really now that's what makes me feel just sort of this downtrodden mentality about all of these kids that are coming in, being recruited at the highest level versus transfer portal commits. I just really feel like there's not that level of, just commitment to the actual brand, to the school. We're just acting as a placeholder for them until they maybe can find something better. It's like they're an open market commodity to see who, the highest bidder will pay. And we know that there's plenty of schools out there right now that is, dishing out cash as fast as they can, trying to bring all these kids in. It's amazing to me, and I won't even name any schools. We know who they are. We've seen them in the media, and we know who the ones out there that are paying the high dollars to bring these kids in. But I don't care how much money you pay a kid. It's not going to take into account what Curt Cignetti is doing and what he's done at Indiana with these kids that are there with him as well. So, it's a mess, Scott. And unfortunately, I really don't see, until they establish some type of guardrails and look at these young men and women as actual employees of the school. Because, I don't think you realize there's actually schools. If you just have a kid that comes to school, paid tuition, books, all their education, everything paid for, they're averaging around $200,000 per kid. That's something that the regular college student does not get. So on top of that, how NIL was set up for were these smaller commodities of monies where you go out and you're sponsored by something where you put your name behind it and you're making a couple $100,000 here, a couple $100,000 there. We have become a mini NFL system with no guardrails. and it's becoming just wildly chaotic. And like you said, until they figure out a way to put a framework around it, we're going to continue to feel this uneasiness and this uncomfortable feeling in our gut, because we really just don't know, as far as the roster that we are going to entertain next year as Georgia fans, how many of those kids are really committed to the G that's on their helmet. That's a really scary thought. Moving forward, I saw some questions a while ago. Let's see. What does the Dogs need out of the portal, and is the player we need even out there? Okay. As of right now, I'm going to actually show the ones outgoing, the newest ones outgoing. There's actually 14 total that have entered the portal from the University of Georgia, and I'm showing you the newest ones because the one at the very top is probably, out of the 14, the one that kind of bugs me the most, because of player potential, because of the position of need, is Dominic Kelly. So, as you know, University of Georgia has 14 people, 14 students, student athletes. I don't even know if I call them student athletes anymore. They have 14 players in the portal. And really, I'd say 11 of them, 12 of them needed to go find a better opportunity. People like Chris Jones, who I've had an opportunity to talk to and entertain, and his family through Twitter and being able to know them. I'm very happy for him going up to Boston College and hopefully making a name for himself. He came in that linebacker class with Justin Williams and with Chris Cole at the inside linebacker position, and then they moved him to outside linebacker, and it just didn't fit. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. Bo Hughley, I've become a big fan of him over this year as he tried to provide depth to the offensive line, him going out to Colorado and getting a chance to do some good things out there. But I'm going to say this, Dominic Kelly, Scott, saw him play this year, really liked his play. And honestly, right now, when you look at DeMelo Jones and Ellis Robinson being that setup, and I look at Jonte Gilbert being the only person on the actual roster still as a true cornerback, and then you've got Justice Fitzpatrick and you've got Caden Harris coming in. Justice Fitzpatrick, I don't know if people realize this or not, very good corner, but he tore his ACL, so he's going to be coming in like Ryan Montgomery did as a quarterback position. Just your thoughts, anything that's just really unsettling with you with the ones that have left?
Dominic Kelly's a blow. I think Jonel Aguero, I get it. Dinkins, effectively took your spot, but I think there was such a way for him to be phased in to build himself up, especially in a defense that prizes itself on using, defensive backs and leveraging contain like we do, and some of the techniques and ideas that Kirby Smart has. But that one I understand, even though I really didn't want it to happen. But Dominic Kelly of the list is the only one that really is a blow. Elo Mendoza, I mean, for the most I saw him play was in the Sugar Bowl, which again, is one of my huge criticisms of, I'm seeing a lot of names I didn't see all season, which sometimes you have to. The Gabe Harrises of the world going down hurt us a lot more than we thought it would. But really, like you said, Coach, it's just a numbers thing at this point. I think Dominic Kelly was a really high potential player that's in a huge position of need. So now, does Georgia rush to get, anyone in between now and 48 hours? Who knows? But really, I'm happy for all the remaining players. Adrian Maddox makes sense. Bo Hughley makes sense. Jaden Harris, Chris Jones is definitely one I fully understand, especially with what the rotation looks like next year. So.
Yeah, we're very safety heavy, and we also brought the kid in from Oklahoma. But that kid that's coming in from Oklahoma as a corner is he's been injury prone as well. So I mean, it's like there's nothing that has been put in a permanent effect to me that makes me feel really good about us at the defensive back position, unless we're planning on converting some of these safeties over, because we've got plenty of safeties, not only from the portal but the recruiting class as well as what we retain, and that's not counting the ones that'll be coming back next year. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that, and then Andre Evans leaving is another one of those DBs that fit that criteria. But, I sit there and think to myself about Kyron Jones. He got hurt. We never saw him again for the rest of the year. Then there was that playing time between Ja'Cory and Zion Branch. We fought about that a lot, as you remember in previous shows. And, to me, when I look at that situation, I'm going, who's going to be that true safety that's going to be over there? Khalil Barnes comes in. You think because he's got 3 years under his belt that coming in as a fourth-year player, they want to be able to plug and play. But you still got to learn the system. You still got to learn Kirby Smart's defense. You got to learn, and you've got to appropriate yourself. And as well as I do, Scott, if you just come in dry, it takes a lot to work to develop in Kirby Smart's defense. And that's something to me that's just going to be really a question mark as we move in to this offseason. the next group here, this is the actual group of incumbents that we've got coming in that are going to be from the transfer portal committed to the University of Georgia. I've asked Scott to kind of look down through the group. I've actually broken down 5 of these 7 as part of my Patreon right now. They're in there. I've got about a 10-minute breakdown on each one of these guys. I am at the one I have not done. Dante Dowdle, the kid from Kentucky that I mentioned a while ago, and Gentry Williams are the 2 that I have not broken down as of yet. Position of need. I know we're stacked at linebacker. We've got tons of safeties. As you heard me say a while ago, I'm thinking about the defensive back position. You look at a defensive line, I really thought maybe we might go after another big interior lineman type guy because, Elijah Griffin is the real deal. But I don't know, between Josh Horton and between Xavier McLeod, who's coming back as well, that's good experience. Maybe with another year under their belt, we see different abilities from them at the other interior bigs. We're definitely good at the defensive end position, at the jack position. But, everybody seems to be wanting to hit on the wide receiver position. And as well as I do, we just got the Dickerson kid that committed from the 2026 group, and we're bringing in Isaiah Canyon from Georgia Tech, who really, to me, he is a mirror replica of Noah Thomas to me, watching him on film. Maybe not as good with his hands. He has a history of dropping the football, but when he does good things, he reminded me of Noah Thomas on film when I was watching him. Almost the same speed, the way he goes up and gets the football, his route running, his tree, how it's polished, and what he does. But out of this group right here, is there anyone that's caught your eye yet, Scott, that you've been looking at?
Amarius Williams, really like that we're hitting on a true edge. Especially one that's been playing as well as he's been playing. I just think that helps out a lot. I mean, you saw how thin Georgia was in specific positions, and we found out pretty quickly. Really, I'm happy with the portal haul. I think Canyon is a great get. I do worry about his drop problem. I think that's something we can't afford with the loss of Zach Branch. And I have tons of questions in the skill room of, okay, well, how do we in aggregate replicate those explosive plays? And something we really, really got to focus on is phasing in the tight ends, because that room, like you said, with safeties and linebackers, is just so overly saturated. It's a point of we have to use it at this point. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's a must. But really, I like Amarius Williams. That one was a big splash. I think Dowell can be, phased in, especially as you saw when Nate got hurt and, Chauncey was getting phased back into his first game. You start seeing, oh, wow, we really, really get thin at true running backs, because I think McCray was great as a specialty back, but he wasn't going to have traditional carries like Nate and Chauncey were. He just doesn't have that overall speed. But I think we've done a decent job in the portal. There's a couple receivers out there, a couple things that I wish we would have hit on, but for what it was and what was available, I think we did a decent job.
I wanted to answer this question. Your protege that follows you in here when we have our live shows, we have another Scott Green. Can Dogs get him back? I'm assuming you mentioned about Dominic Kelly, the one that we're high on about, leaving. Yes, when they enter the portal, there's no set determining factor that they go somewhere. Mm-hmm. We know that from what happened with Amarius Mims, the big tackle that we had that went to Cincinnati. He was going to leave and decided to the last second, I'm going to come back in. There's a few that have done that. So that process is not necessarily end of the period of the sentence and definitive. They can still come back if there's not anybody that really wants to pick them up. Just because they enter the transfer portal does not mean they are necessarily gone. I do know this, with Dominic Kelly, as much as I saw with his reps and what he could do as an athlete, I have a feeling there was something about him they did not like as far as a practice player, or maybe the fact that he was not necessarily the best, didn't give you best effort, wasn't a team type guy. Because to me, when you have someone that has special talent and can play football, but doesn't want to be a part of a program in a way that's a team player, they'll find ways to let you go somewhere else and take that mentality and that attitude with it. So that could be the reason why Dominic Kelly was easily said, okay, see you later, buddy. I really hate that if that's the case, but that's just me on the outside looking in, thinking about, you got a quality kid that I've seen he got decent reps this past year, showed very high potential. In fact, I actually did a breakdown on him on how much potential I liked in him, because he got to play a lot against Kentucky. And, also, too, it's funny, Scott, that I remember when Chauncey Bowens was basically making a name for himself and all of a sudden growing in the depth chart, and Nate is having the fumbling problems. I remember for a while there, man, Nate Frazier was almost a forgotten commodity. And it was like Chauncey all of a sudden was going to be, he was running back one for about 3 weeks until the injury bug hit him. And then all of a sudden Nate came back on the screen. It's sort of like, what have you done for me yesterday mentality. And it drives me nuts because all these kids provide depth together for the collaboration of making this machine work. And, to me, Chauncey Bowens is a forgotten running back, not to mention the fact that you're still going to have Dwight Phillips Jr. coming back. You got, Bo Walker coming back, as well as the Jay Lamar kid that they've got coming from Colquitt County to add to the depth. Not only Dante Dowdle, but I want to piggyback off what you said. To me, watching film so far, I haven't had a chance to do Dante. I actually broke his film down the other day, but haven't put it out. Have not looked at anything on Gentry Williams, but Amaris Williams to me is the fifth that I like as well. His talent, I don't care his 4-star, 5-star talent. I don't care. I'm watching him on film. I know what his abilities are. 6'2", about 280 pounds. He can't play an interior guy. He's not going to be an A and B gap guy. He's going to be an edge player, similar to what Gabe Harris does. With his speed and his ability to get off tackles, he uses his speed and his bend and what he does to get to the quarterback. But the one thing I like from him, Scott, is he knows how to get off a block. He actually engages, extends, and gets off blocks better than any kid I've ever seen. And that's the one thing, if he gets the opportunity for reps, I think he's going to be a hot commodity for us on the defensive line, and that's something exciting to say. So with that being said, we'll have all the breakdowns out there. Like I said, I have 5 of the 7 done right now. We talked about a while ago, Dante Dowdle, the kid from Kentucky, has been this. Georgia will make his 4th school in 4 years. So, he's another one where I kind of question that, what are you dedicated to, buddy? I hope that he's able to come in. I think I heard someone say the other day that they thought he had sort of this Kendall Milton sort of parallel. And watching him on film, to me, he's faster than Kendall Milton. His feet are quicker. His vision's not very good, and that's something he's got to improve on with the running back room. But I'm going to say this. Right now, looking at that group, Khalil Barnes brings a little bit of veteranship. Isaiah Kenyon brings a little bit of veteranship. Braylon Conley is another kid. He's kind of like, he's a corner position as well that's going to come in. I did a breakdown on him, but he's got very little playing time. It would be very similar to maybe what Dominic Kelly had this year for us. He was played very sporadically, split time with a veteran corner that was on his side. And it's kind of like what they were trying to do with the Harris kid that we had that went into the portal, very first guy. As time went on, they were experimenting between that because they were wanting to get Ellis on the field. They were wanting to get DeMello on the field. So just a lot of underwhelming feelings right now about watching film. But like I said, who knows, when you look at the off season and you bring in these kids, get them stronger and faster in the weight room, all of a sudden they pick up the playbook and they start working. Who knows? We may see one of these kids, show up and show out, and any of them that come in hopefully can replace and add depth to those areas. But, I'm not worried about, going back to what I was saying a while ago, I'm not worried about the wide receiver room. I really want to see kids like Todd Blackshear, C.J. Wiley show up. We forget about London Humphreys and the fact that we still have Sokovie White-Hilton. And, and he's a kid that can honestly be that slot position and help us in that regard. Bringing in the Kenyon kid from Georgia Tech replaces an X position. And I think Noah Thomas was heavily underused. Now, was it because he just lacked potential, didn't have the ability to get the playbook and grasp it well enough, quick enough? I don't know. But again, if that's the case, then it's hard to talk about these kids and talk them up when it may be a same situation. I just don't want to put it out there as like, this guy's going to be a game changer for us when I just don't really know what we're getting in that. But I agree with you, Scott. Amaris Williams is definitely, to me, the best one on the list that we have there. I sit there and think to myself as we bring in these kids from the transfer portal, is the fact that Kirby is sticking to his guns, because I know that's something that they've used in stats, that out of the 12 playoff teams, and honestly, if you compared us to all 134, 135 FBS teams, that you would look at us and say, we are a team that is building from within. We are down at the bottom of the list of how many kids are in the transfer portal, and we have brought in the least amount, or at the top of the list of the least amount of people brought in from the transfer portal. I think it's actually something to be – I'm going to ask you your thoughts. You may disagree with me on this. Is it nice to see that we're trying to build the kids that we're recruiting and bringing them in instead of having this mercenary by mercenary year, similar to what, I know Lane Kiffin got modeled at Ole Miss. And having these kids actually within the system grow up and become your tenured kids, your redshirt juniors or even some seniors, because the days of the COVID year, 6-year guy is over. And we're going to get back to some normalcy with that. So I'm just curious your thoughts as we move forward. Do you like the system that we're putting into play? Is that something that we can at least say is a positive value with the amount of kids?
Yeah, if you trust the talent identifying, scouting that you're pushing out, if you're picking the right kids from high school, I think that should be a really, really good, make you warm and fuzzy about, hey, look, they trust what they have on the roster. If you don't, then this is a concern because you're starting to look at, like you said, that transfer portal haul was key in 2 or 3 spots, and the rest of it just really seemed like depth. A couple project players, and then one other splash player from East Carolina. So at that time, it's kind of a 50-50 depending on if you trust the staff as they are now. And I know from the fandom, there's a lot of people out there that are saying, look, at minimum, we need to add staff, add analysts, add, another true co-OC, or, get rid of a current co-DC, not co-DC, and get someone else in there to change things up. So it's one of those trades of, I think it's a great thing in principle. I think it's what makes college football so easy to identify where teams are going to be good, is not just returning production, but returning snap count by player. And you can tell that those teams 90% of the time are going to be not just better, but drastically better, because we live in a world where, you have 1, maybe 2 years guaranteed with a kid. If you really, really have introduced yourself and have developed in the right way and you have a good relationship, and that's even a crapshoot. It's no real way to tell who's going to be on your roster. So I think it's a good thing. It really tells me a lot of the players are bought in. I hope that's the case. Like I said, that's the thing that made the season so disappointing to me at the end is, you saw a bunch of fighters. Fourth quarter was where they lived and died, and they beat so many people in the same way that we got beat. And I think having those same guys that have established that presence on the field coming back it's a huge advantage, or it can be. And I hope they take advantage of it.
I can tell you this. I've been a part of a lot of heavy senior laden teams. It's amazing how a senior heavy team makes you look like a better coach. It's funny how that works versus a team where I had a bunch of athletes that were sophomores, a little bit of juniors, a little bit of freshmen you were counting on, and they'd make you want to pull your hair out and go count, just literally go to your office and want to break everything in the room because of just the inconsistencies and the chaos they created. The more we see kids that are developed within the system, that grow within the system, I find it so funny too that our fandom of the UGA fans that look at us as a program and what we've done over the last 5 years. It's amazing. We go back-to-back national champions. Haven't done that since, obviously unprecedented time to do what we did, but hadn't had a championship from the 2021 season since 1980. And all of a sudden, everybody thinks we should be in the national championship picture every year. They don't realize the actual dynamic shifts that go into everything you're doing. It is like trying to put together a plane as it's crashing. And it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do when you're not only trying to coach X's and O's and be the CEO of a program, but you've got to deal with attitudes of kids that are trying to manage millions of dollars that are between the ages of 18 and 22 years of age, all while going to school, trying to earn their degree and playing football at a high level in Division I at the University of Georgia. I think we forget about those things. I'm not sitting here saying I feel sorry for these kids because obviously they're well off more than I am at this point in time in my life, but it just really makes me wonder sometimes about the fact of how we're looking and evaluating the program overall because we haven't had success since the 12-team playoff began. And all of a sudden now Kirby and staff are being questioned about what they're doing and how they're approaching things. Most people want to always find a scapegoat. Right now it seems to be more towards what Gunnar Stockton's production was later in the season, and of course OC Mike Bobo, but people questioning Glenn Schumann. But they wasn't questioning Glenn Schumann when back in the 2021-2022 season when, he's working with Nakobe Dean, Channing Tindall, and Quay Walker, who were seasoned veterans at the linebacker position and had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of snaps that were so much better for them because, like I said, I think that's the reason why we should be excited about them next year. Speaking of being excited about them next year, I know as we move into next season, as we finish our last segment here, by the way, we appreciate you being with us. Head on a Swivel. Scott Green, Chris Hayes coming to you on our Wednesday night show. Would love for your chats. Make sure you're hitting the thumbs up button in there and helping us with the algorithms for showing that show out there. If you like the show, we appreciate your support and your patronage to the program. If we look at the program, just as I was talking about, there's one thing that I feel like that we have coming back is that retention. I'm not going to go too far in depth with that, but as we look at Kirby talking, to Gunnar Stockton there, I know a lot of people questioning those two guys. Believe it or not, seasoned veteran coach, probably if not the best coach in college football, with a guy now that has a full year of being QB1 under his belt. Okay. Let's talk some Dog fans back from the ledge and talk about what are some things next year that we can look at to feel good about where we're at in the world of, where Georgia football is headed in 2026.
I think it speaks to how spoiled we are, and I'm definitely a victim of it myself. How many programs in the last 10 years have had a single season, taking out the title years, like Georgia? The list becomes less than 3, maybe 4 programs. And of those 4 programs, that was 1 year of the one we're talking about.
Right.
And so to caveat everything, like Coach is saying, 48 to 50%, roughly how you count it. Georgia's, roster was extremely young. We're talking sophomores, freshmen. Played a heck of a lot of them. I mean, at the end of the year, Drew Bobo going down was a knife to the heart, because now you have 3 freshmen against a really pissed off and older Ole Miss defensive line. And so, like you said, I think that's a perfect analogy. You're putting a plane together as it's falling apart. So with this retention, with the mentality of those coming back, I think it's a huge advantage. And one thing I want to say, look, Gunnar has to get better in certain aspects. I fully agree. But there's something in him that you can't teach. That dude would literally die on the football field if it meant Georgia was going to get the win. And someone like that, you have to sit there and cheer for. Now, if things are so bad in certain areas, that mentality can kind of get bypassed. But right now, I think with one off season, what we're going to see coming in August, September, he's going to be improved. It's a question of how much, but that mentality is going to be there, and that trickles down, guys. Like that permeates the entire team. I think you go to the defensive side of the football. You're going to see a lot of those senior-led guys, Gabe Harris is like, just the way they play the game is going to replicate and kind of clone that mentality out to the remaining 10 players on the field with them. So it's like, look, will Kirby win another title in his tenure? It depends on how long his tenure is, but it's very likely. Will it be next year? Who the heck knows? But it's one of those things, guys. Take it in while you can. Winning 12 games, winning 13 games a season, guys, it's unprecedented for 95, 96, 97% of college football programs in their history.
Yep.
What Ole Miss has done is really reset the record. Ole Miss.
I think we lost Scott due to his battery going dead. He was telling me a while ago that his battery might be dying. We lost Scott there. He had a very good point of what he was talking about as well, that, when I look at the principle of what he's saying is that the retention that you have on your staff is very important. Yeah, I think he's letting me know right now that he went dead on me. Let's see. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, his power went out on his laptop. But we look at the retention of what we have. And, there was a comment here made by Scott, the other Scott. Bill Within is the character of the team and the program. Agree? I do agree. And if the more kids that you can find with that quality characteristic, the where you want to bring them in and they are proud of the program, they are proud of the Power G that they're wearing on their helmet, it does mean more to them for the team versus the name that's on the back of the jersey. And you build from within, that retention gets better and better. And to me, the more senior veteranship, and I say senior, not like senior level academically, but the more senior level kids that you have, the ones that have played 3 years to possibly 4 years, depending on what their status is going to the NFL, is something that really makes me feel better about what's going to happen. And honestly, that's the reason why you see Indiana modeling that this year, because of what they've been able to do. Now, I don't think that's going to be repeatable, because we're going to be dealing with, the COVID year kids and all the 6-year kids that we have. And now they're working on trying to create this system where they actually have agreed to, I would say 5 years. You have basically 5 years total to play with a red shirt in there as well. And that's it. You're able by your junior year to declare for the NFL, and you're able to give 5 years total if you're redshirted in your freshman year. But they're talking about how many games they can play with not being redshirted. And that's something that, I have been wondering about as well. But I think what we need to look at and be excited about as we get into the latter part of the season, of the preseason, getting into summer, is that you've got to be excited about what we're bringing back and what the retention is of what we're bringing back that has experience to be able to play. So I'm going to bring Scott back in here. Welcome back in, my friend. A little bit
Weather's testing us. I mean, I'm sure the viewers saw me do one of these because the lights flashed, and I'm thinking, oh no, here we go. So everyone,
I
hope
thought
they're
your
safe.
battery had gone dead on you.
Funny enough, the laptop kept going, but the internet went for just long enough to kick me out.
It
But
kicked
I
you
appreciate
out.
you bringing me back, Coach.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Just bringing you back in. I'll let you continue what you were saying because I was talking about the retention of it. I think it's so huge because of what Indiana has been modeling this year with what they have and trying to help people understand the COVID year of having 6-year kids is going out the door. But the higher level kids that you have with the most snaps that are playing is definitely going to give you better feelings about who's going to have national championship contention for the next year. So you can continue where you were at.
I mean, here's the other thing too. Not trying to put Neosporin on a big wound, which is Georgia's lack of success in the playoffs under the 12 team. But let's look at the last 3 national champions. So Michigan, really, really old team. I mean, they utilized that COVID year rule from 21 to 23 on top of some unscrupulous activities, but you still have to respect the product they had on the field. They were one of those teams that, in the same vein that Indiana does, is look, we're not going to flash you to death. We're going to do what we do really well, and we're going to out execute you and out physical you while we're doing it. And then Ohio State, massive retention costs, 20 plus to $30 million, whatever figure that you were given, that was to keep that experience and retention together. So there's no telling how much Georgia is spending for those who are fandoms of saying, oh, well, we need to spend more, we need to do this. Who's to say that Georgia's not spending more to keep this many players happy on this team? And then 25, it looks like Indiana is theirs to lose. Now, look, I think Miami can win it. I'm not saying Miami won't keep it close, but for the performance that Indiana has had leading into it, it has to trigger something in your mind to say, there may be something to just keeping and developing guys. And that's the one thing I appreciate about both these teams. And this is what I want to, just hyper focusing on Georgia. In the same way Miami is so good on the line of scrimmage and Indiana is so good on the lines of scrimmage and retention and development is still a thing, college football as itself on the field has not changed. What is successful will always be successful in terms of actual college football. It's outside the field that has radically reshaped our understanding of how that product gets put together on the field. Yeah. So I'm only disappointed in this year because of what we did all season long, and we were now on the receiving end of it. But you don't really beat great teams, and I think Ole Miss and Georgia were hyper. I mean, razor thin margin difference between both teams. We were just on the receiving end of what we've been doing, and I expected a little bit better coming out in the second half, and that's something that the mentality that shapes a player in a program like Georgia throughout the year. You saw that identity reshape. Now you're not having to start from scratch. There's things that you can build on. And Coach, I mean, you know better than me. I mean, your confidence kind of gives me confidence because I'm fan first, player second. So it's one of those things. I'm excited for next year, but I know that there's got to be vast improvements to make up for certain losses. But the losses are so minimal that I can see it being done, and then ground being gained, especially with Bobo coming back. I mean, again, guys, that's your second quarterback. You're asking, probably Gunner to take over some of those responsibilities in mic identification or double check what the new center is doing, Tolliver. And so poor Tolliver's, trying to do the same thing. It's one of those really weird balancing acts. And I don't think we have to have that next year. Now, whether it happens or not, that's kind of the question.
I'm going to say something from David Pollock because I think Alabama really gave us a false positive on how we felt about Malachi Tolliver taking over for Drew Bobo. He talked about, and I really felt like it was going to be detrimental that Drew Bobo being hurt was going to cost us more than it was worth. I think Alabama gave us a false positive. We really didn't get exploited against Alabama because, to be quite frank with you, Alabama was not a very good football team at the time we faced them in the SEC championship. In fact, hell, they digressed even more playing Indiana out in the Rose Bowl. You just saw them give up. Their will to play was gone by midway through the third quarter. It's amazing to think that the Indiana Hoosiers put the Alabama Crimson Tide in more or less the chokehold and the sleeper and choked them out. But my thing is that all of a sudden that caught up with us in the Ole Miss game again in the Sugar Bowl. All of a sudden we got exploited where Gabe Harris was missing. We got exploited a little bit where Malachi Tolliver was. And you're thinking to yourself, we're still sitting here scrutinizing, Scott. It's amazing to think with the two losses we had, we lost by 3 points for both of them. I'm not going to count the safety of Ole Miss.
Yeah.
That was just a gimme.
No way.
Yeah, it was a 3-point game, 3-point game. I mean, we're not sitting here talking about that we got the belt to ass or anything like that. We got beat by 3 points in both games where we could have won. I mean, very easily could have won. It's not one of those, you're just reaching for the stars could have won. No, we could have won both games. I mean, I can name two things that we could have done differently that would have been points on the board versus what they didn't get. And, we're still sitting here scrutinizing over a 2-loss team where everybody wants to jump ship and say we need to completely change everything that we're doing. Speaking of, real quickly before we end the show, this gentleman here, I think you're one of the new to the show. Welcome being in. JSYD 634. Kirby needs to go to a 4-3. They're giving up the edge and passes over the mid seam. I'm going to say this honestly. I really felt like losing Gabe and Drew did really hurt us. I'm going to say this. Most teams went to a 3-4. Why you see so many teams run a 3-4 is because of the ability to adjust with an edge to create a 4-man front and take your third backer and make him a nickel, a fifth secondary guys, because so many teams – was that thunder? I just heard
I don't know what that was, to be honest with you.
I hope everything's okay there. But going to a 3-4 allows you to have two adjusters. You have a guy that can walk up and play a fourth down lineman. You have a third linebacker that become your nickel back, which is where you have your fifth secondary guy, because so many teams are in the spread and have so many options without a fullback having the H in the backfield and being able to run all the RPO games, still be able to run all your gap scheme work, your zone game, all the things that you want to do without it looking like an actual running formation. That's the reason why you see these morphs that are taking place. But because so many teams play these offenses, I find us watching me so many times as a 3-4 team, we stay in a 4-man front all the time. I really would love for us, if we did adjust, go to more of what's a 4-2-5 and truly have that hybrid that is just the nickel, and let us have a true 4-down lineman look that allows us to have two true edges that play the 9 technique and the 5 technique respectively, or 2-5 techniques. You can still play your over fronts, you can still play your under fronts, but you only have one adjuster, and that's in the nickel. And you can even go to dime. We have solid enough safeties that I don't mind being able to walk up in the box if you bring linebackers and still be able to do it even in dime, where you have take out a defensive lineman and add another secondary guy. So it's really hard when you're looking at trying to say to move to a 4-3, because believe it or not, I ran a 4-3 when I was in Murray County at North Murray when I coached Ladd McConkey and his brother Hinton. That was my defense, but that was back when we were facing a lot of pro I teams. You had tight end, 21 personnel, fullback, tailback. 4-3 was easier to adjust to that, but we wasn't facing the spread teams that we face that people see nowadays. That's why the adjuster has to be there. So I don't think you're ever going to see Kirby Smart move away from a true 3-man front or a mint look. But it wouldn't be a bad idea to look at, man, it would sure be nice if we had true 4-down linemen that rush the football, because when we do that, it just, to me, the setting the edge concept, it just lets me know you got two true DNs that are willing to take on a guard that's pulling the flathead, but you can also get that bend and run the hoop and get to the quarterback and rush the passer from both sides and not have to bring exotic blitzes to get that done. Because if there's one thing I think we failed in this year is we didn't do a very good job of getting to the quarterback with our front four. And that's something that you see a lot of successful defenses, example, Miami, being able to do that. Their interior guys and their outside guys are getting to the quarterback. And so that's something I would love to see as an uptick this year, bringing the guys back that we have in order. And then Gabe Harris coming back, obviously, is huge for that process as well. So as we close up shop here, we're right under an hour, Scott. Any closing thoughts?
Excited for next year. Again, Monday's going to be interesting to see. Well, again, no reason for the fans to harp on the Carson Beck narrative. It is what it is. Guys played 7 years of good college football when he started. So again, there's no hate from me or a lot of the fans and like you said, Coach, that we talked to. So I'm interested in the game. I'll be kind of watching half-heartedly in the background. But for next year, I am excited. Again, I'm just really going to focus in on the improvement of the players, and I think that's where us as a fandom have to too. Look, trust Kirby Smart. Sometimes I don't want to in terms of the staff, but there doesn't need to be this massive change. There hasn't needed to. It's small, finite details that need to be refocused in on, and understand that both 24 and 25 had their own internal issues and they're separate teams. So we have to kind of reshake what we see and hope that mentality transfers over from 25 to 26.
Well said, my friend. More snaps equals more success. And let me add one last thing before we close shop for the night, partner. Think about it. Stetson Bennett, 2-time national championship quarterback. How old was he when he left the University of Georgia after the TCU that he got such a hard time giving?
24, right?
Yeah. Think about that. It means something to have a lot of snaps under your belt. You got to think about it, guys. He was running around making the 2017-2018 team that lost to Alabama on second 26. I hate to bring that up. He was running around like Baker Mayfield. I remember that story very well, and was still there in 2020, 2022-2023 season, winning the national championship against TCU. Veteranship matters. And we appreciate you being with us tonight. I'm Chris Hayes, along with Scott Green. We're Head on a Swivel. We thank you for your time and efforts being with us. Please make sure you hit the thumbs up, like, and get those notifications for all things that we do. If you like what you see, please share it to friends. Let them know about it. We're going to be on every Wednesday through the off season. We're going to be doing some real cool giveaways as well as part of the show. We definitely want to make sure that your time is well spent with us as we go through this off season and get ready for all the expectations for next year. Again, Chris Hayes, Scott Green saying good night. Wish you well. And as always, go Dogs.
Go Dogs.